views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime, and if people ask the question, what are the Social Justice Forums about? Well, it's a show that addresses the inequities that many people face. We promote civic engagement, we have conversation and discussion, but most importantly, we hope that you tune in. Social Justice Forums starts right now. And welcome back. Gun violence and intimate partner violence are often viewed as separate problems requiring different responses, but neighborhoods impacted by high rates of gun violence also have the highest levels of reported domestic violence incidents. The RISE Project, which stands for Reimagining Intimacy Through Social Engagement, works to ensure community-based anti-violence efforts have more tools as well as resources to prevent and respond to the intersection of intimate partner and gun violence. The project supports healthy relationship norms and the prevention of domestic violence at the community level through public education campaigns, community programming, and efforts focused on community healing. Joining me to share a little bit more about the work they do is the program manager at the RISE Project, Nathalie Arzu, and we thank you, Nathalie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good. And as we talk about this, and I start off in the intro talking about gun violence and intimate partner violence, you know, they're separate problems, but they do require different responses. Share a little bit with me about that.
A lot of things that's different with when we talk about the RISE Project is that we transform the way we respond to intimate partner violence. A lot of times across New York City, when we respond is usually after a fatality or someone's now incarcerated, right? And also understanding and addressing the intersectionality is that a lot of time gun homicides stem from an intimate partner violence situation, whether it's a gun in a home, which increases the likelihood of fatality by 500%, or maybe a family member or a friend trying to protect their loved one using a firearm to protect them. A lot of times when we're talking about we want to be intentional about ending gun violence, we have to also be talking about IPV-related gun violence as well.
Yeah. And when we talk about intimate partner violence, how is that defined?
Intimate partner violence is whether it's abuse or harm that occurs between intimate partners, right? Think of it as a lot of times we just use the word domestic violence. Domestic violence is kind of just an umbrella term, and under that is family violence and intimate partner violence. Intimate partners can be whether you dated before and you no longer are dating, but dated prior to, are in a relationship now, are married, talked for a little while. It's defined how if you have relations, it doesn't require you to be sexually involved, just be intimate with someone in a particular capacity.
Yeah. And so your work really is trying to create some norms here. And so talk about what some of the challenges that you're facing and what you'd like to see happen.
We all come from different communities. A lot of times we're learning about relationships from our friends and family. And a lot of times we're not getting the healthy information, right? So a lot of times we just keep promoting and spreading false narratives of what a healthy relationship looks like, right? And our job at RISE is to change that, right? We want to be able to be in spaces to actually see what norms people, when we talk about healthy relationships, what are they actually thinking? And when we take that information, we also give them the right information, right? Because it's a two-way street when we talk about education at RISE. A lot of times we do a lot of campaigns in the community. We give out palm cards where we talk about healthy relationship that other people have said, whether it's communication and what that looks like, right? When we're talking about when we're angry, how do we respond? When we're talking about expressing ourselves, what does that look like? Especially coming from community where we don't express our feelings as much. We don't communicate well. And a lot of times the same communication skills you use with your family and friends, sometimes that also is the same communication you use with your partner.
And so when we talk about partner violence, intimate partner violence, obviously a lot of conversations need to be had. What can we do in terms of helping people navigate through this very, for lack of a better saying, intimate situation that sometimes goes bad?
One of the things that arises is that a lot of times when we talk about intimate partner violence, a lot of people just think about the physical, right? There's so much harm that can be caused, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's verbal, sexual, technological. There are so many harms that can be caused. And one of the things we say is that everyone has the capacity to cause harm. So one of the things is that we want to give family and friends the knowledge and the resource so they're able to talk to their loved ones, because the individual causing harm in their relationship is usually a family friend or a loved one, and we care about them, we don't want to wait until they're in a situation, whether they're being incarcerated or fatality happening due to IPV, before we get involved, right? We want to want residents, community residents, to feel comfortable to go to a friend and say, hey, I care about you, I seen this has been going on, how can I support you to create those changes so that down the line something doesn't happen due to the intimate partner violence that's occurring.
Yeah. And so domestic violence is definitely a topic that we talk about. We highlight that here on the show, and we do different things during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. What can we tell people about really speaking out and really allowing themselves an opportunity to receive some help?
A lot of times when we talk about intimate partner violence, the person experiencing or causing harm is usually going to their network, which is usually family, friends, people in their community. So a lot of the work we do is actually building awareness on that. Even though we interact with someone who may not be experiencing it, they may be getting the knowledge so that they can pass it on to somebody else. Also understanding that it's a difficult thing. A lot of times intimate partner violence, domestic violence is something that wasn't talked about outside of the home. So it's kind of an uncomfortable talk that people feel like, hey, this is not something we talk about. How do we actually have these conversations? And that's the things that we give out. We give out tools, bystander training, intervention, just so that people feel comfortable. How do I have this conversation with someone so they don't get defensive? How do I have a conversation with them so they know that I'm coming to that person with the knowledge and the resources to support them to create that change?
Yeah, and creating change is important. Obviously, a healthy environment is, the key. You want to be able to be in a healthy environment, and particularly with someone that you're, intimate with, or living with, or in relationship with. What have you learned coming out of COVID? Because in this COVID situation, a lot of people were forced to stay home, and sometimes in some very unhealthy and toxic situations.
That's definitely, when we say toxic, even when we're talking about whether it's youth groups or community groups, we say toxic is just another way of saying unhealthy, right? When people are in home where they're unable to communicate, usually even during the pandemic, we have seen that people still weren't calling the hotline, right? Even places that they would need to walk into were kind of closed. But they were able to connect to family members and friends. And how can family members and friends be that support system for them, right? Whether it's creating a service plan, a safety plan for them, right? Also, someone, when they're experiencing harm, we understand they're also not willing to call the police. We know when we come from Black and brown communities, when we're calling the police, even for something as IPV related, we know that because of the color of our skin and the circumstances we live in, it can escalate. It can be something totally different. And sometimes people still care about the loved one that is causing them harm. They don't want them arrested. They also just want them to change or want them just to take a walk so that they don't continue to be harmed in that instant.
Mm. And so the work that you're doing right now, share a little bit about the services, because if somebody's out there saying, listen, what kind of services do you provide? I may know somebody that's actually being affected. What do you do?
Outside of the trainings that we provide to those that are doing the work in the same community that we are, we also are working with those that are causing and experiencing harm. So for someone experiencing harm, we help navigate those services. We know that sometimes you can call a hotline and it becomes like, it goes into a black hole, we say. Sometimes we don't know what happens to that individual. Do they even reach out? Do they even get the services that they need? So one of the things that we do is help navigate that system while also giving warm handoffs. So we try to create connections with organizations that are providing the services. So we can say, hey, I know you told your story so many times. I'm going to connect you with somebody that is going to help you so that they can kind of not go through the extra steps. And it also depends on what services they need, whether it's housing, right? Whether it's order of protection, whether it's a transfer for their housing. Maybe it depends on what they need, and what they need is what we try to get all the information so that we're able to provide it for them. For someone causing harm, that's one of the main things that we do, is that we work with them one-on-one. If they're not ready for one-on-one services, we do groups which is groups of people who may have caused harm or are continuing to cause harm, to actually create change and hold themselves accountable for their actions. A lot of times when we talk about IPV and domestic violence, we're able to get the person experiencing harm the services that they need. But then again, we don't stop the cycle of violence, because then that person causing harm is going to go into another relationship and continue to cause harm. So one thing at Rise is that we try to create that form of accountability for them to change their behaviors. And that can look like a group-based setting, or that can look like individual services. And a lot of times your family members and friends know the person causing harm. And it's okay to say, hey, I know this service that can help identify why is it that you're causing harm. It can be from trauma from the past, right? It can be something that you learn as a young person and assume this is the way I communicate. This is how I show I care about somebody, right? Even growing up when we're young, when a boy hits a girl, oh, it's because you're showing them that you like them. But as you get older, that's something that can get stuck in someone's head, and an assumption of like, hey, I'm causing harm, but it's to show you how I love you. And that can also be one of the things that needs to be worked out in one-on-one sessions with a coordinator at Rise.
Yeah, I want to go back for a minute, because when we talk about this, it's very important. You're talking about something that's very specific in terms of the person that's causing harm, or better yet, it can be technically known as the abuser or the offender. Many times we have conversations that really center around victims, but your work really entails dealing with also those who are, offenders and those who cause harm. What can you tell us about some of the work that you've done there, and what are some of the results that are actually coming out of that?
We don't use those particular terms. One of the things we want to do is we want people to come as their whole selves and give them a chance to change. When we use words like offenders and perpetrators, those things kind of label, and they're court words. So one of the things we say is like someone who's causing harm, right? And the lot of ways that we interact is we can get a referral from a crisis management system, which is an anti-violence programs that are throughout New York City. Or we can even interact with someone in our sessions or our healing groups, when someone can say something and it's like, hey, let me pull you aside. Can I talk to you for a second? Right? A lot of our work can look like individual work, where it's like sessions, right? We don't talk about therapy. It's really a chance for self-reflection, right? Practicing accountability. What does that look like, right? Also understanding why the behaviors you're doing, right? Sometimes we're not given space, and even when we talk about therapy, it's also so taboo, is that we just want to talk. We're going to talk to you like we're going to talk to our friends, our family members, because we care about you, because you're part of the community. We don't believe in throwing people out. And that's one of the things that we have seen, that people tend to, because we're non-mandated, you're not forced to work with us. So a lot of people may do a session with us and say, hey, I want to come back. I didn't realize I have all these things I need to work through. I didn't know why I was doing these particular things until I had a chance to talk. We're not here to diagnose. We're not here to make assumptions about you. We're not here to judge you. We're here for you to actually work through what it is that's making you actually have those behaviors against your partner, right? Because a lot of times we throw the word anger management, but a lot of times, like, you're not angry at everybody else. You're just angry at one person, right? And it's, why is it that one person?
Yeah. And I know the work that you also do involves crisis response. When people are in a crisis, you are there and present. Give us a little bit about the crisis response.
Due to our capacity, we don't intervene in intimate partner violence situations. Usually after, if there is a fatality or someone is incarcerated, that's when we will respond, right? A lot of times it's, whether it's like, because something like that, especially if we talk about fatality in the community from IPV, that does shake up the community, right? Because these are people that you've seen. Sometimes people say, hey, I should have said something. And in that space, we provide healing, right? We provide support, letting someone know, hey, if something like this was to happen, or you see something like in terms of like people arguing, or a couple that may need support, how can they, whether step in like as a friend, hey, I know about this program, or even reaching out to Rise, hey, Rise, there's I feel like that we should have groups, right? Because we don't want to intentionally target somebody, right? We want to be able to provide groups so people can actually come in and actually have those conversations. Because when we do have conversations as a group, people do a lot of self-reflecting, like, hey, do I do that? Am I intentionally causing harm and not being aware I'm causing harm? Because once you identify you're causing harm and how someone may feel, that's the time that people start taking that accountability. And what does that look like? because a lot of times the word sorry is not enough.
Right. I want to go back to this. You talk about not being mandated, which is very important because that means that a court doesn't have to say you have to do this. So the people that you're actually meeting are people who actually want to do this. And so give us a little bit more and share with us a little bit about how open people are in having these conversations and having these dialogues. We know when you have to do it and you're mandated, of course you're going to do it. But when it's not, which is in your case, you're seeing some great results.
Yeah, so it's different, right? Because you would assume when we're talking about IPV and domestic violence, people don't like to talk about these things. These things make people cringe. People like to keep this in-house. So even having a conversation, we're not coming to you as, hey, I know you did this. This is what the court says you did, right? Because a lot of times some people may be court involved by the time they get to us, right? We allow them the space for them to speak to us and what it is that led them to where they are right now. Right? What could have they done better? Right? And in those spaces, people feel like they feel relieved, right? We're not forcing you to talk. We're not forcing you to like identify yourself as a perpetrator or anything like that. You're a human being, right? Human beings make mistakes, right? Human beings do things. And how do we hold ourselves accountable so that moving forward, we don't continue to cause harm? So we have seen a lot of people come back and say, hey, I want to continue, even though I'm not mandated. I want to be able to continue to work these issues out so that I don't continue to harm people in my life. And so one of the things about our organizations is that even working alongside, we have to work alongside systems to say, hey, we're not mandated, but also just giving out the information to people. Hey, maybe this is a program that you may want to get involved in, right? It's not mandated, but it could be something that you may be interested in. And that's how you get people to even, once they walk through the door, at Rise, we do the rest. We actually just have a conversation. We treat you like a friend. We don't, because at the end of the day, when it's mandated, it's like, hey, this is an appointment. You got to get here. We have to talk about what all these things that happen, but we don't jump into that. We're asking you how you are as a person before we get into all the stuff that can be trauma, right? Can be things that led from the past as to why they make the decisions that they do.
Yeah. And I think that's, from that approach, I think a lot of people will definitely feel like the guard is down. I can have this conversation. It's open. And before we end out, I just want to give you an opportunity to share about, some of the success stories you've had.
We still do confidentiality. So we have a lot of success where a lot of individuals that have worked with us also become peer leaders with us, right? They've also been able to say, hey, I've learned things at Rise and I've been able to tell my friends or feel comfortable to tell my friends, yo, I care about you and I want you to get the help and support that you need. Or even if it's not someone causing harm on a consistent basis, it could be one incident and it's like, hey, maybe you should communicate better. Or maybe if you're angry, you can always reach out to me, right? These are things that we can't quantify how great Rise is until you hear the experiences of people that come back and said, hey, I've learned this and I've been able to share it and give it out to the community. We can't reach everyone in the community because we're so small of a team. But once we also know that one-on-one interaction that we have, once that person feels like, hey, I know what I've done wrong and I know that I had to work on changing behavior, because when we talk about causing harm, it becomes a habit, and when it becomes a habit, it becomes very hard to break. So one of the things that Rise is that we continue to do the work, even though you may not see it in numbers, but you can see it in experience and testimonials of people who come back and say, hey, I want to help support Rise in any way I can, because without Rise, I probably would have still gone into the system, right? I wouldn't have realized what was wrong because people were considering punishment instead of trying to identify why was it that I was causing this particular harm.
Yeah, great work that you're doing, and want to definitely thank you for coming and sharing with us. Now, for more people who want to get connected, let them know.
Yes, so you can definitely reach us on Instagram, which is the Rise Project NYC. We definitely put up content. We also go on live. We talk about anything that connects to our communities as well. And if you ever want to speak to us directly, you can hit us up at 646-709-3623. You could definitely text or call that number.
Well, Nathalie, I want to thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums, the great work that you're doing and really helping people through some really tough, and the word of the day is intimate situations. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Well, we will continue. We've got more on the social justice forums. Don't go anywhere. We'll return right after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, and they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, Arzu Trans.
And welcome back to the show. The Brotherhood Sister Soul organization provides comprehensive, holistic, and long-term support services to youth who range in the age from 8 to 22. Now, the organization is working to develop a new generation of environmental activists, teaching them about the natural world and the unlikely environment of New York City. Now, BroSis youth are deeply engaged in environmental activism and help to maintain a community garden in partnership with other local organizations. Joining us to share a little bit more about the work that goes on, I am joined by Environmental Program Coordinator and alumnus at the Brotherhood Sister Soul, Nando Rodriguez. And Nando, glad to have you here on the Social Justice Forums.
It's a pleasure to be here, Daren. Thank you for having us.
Great. Well, I often tell people that environmental justice is actually social justice. And share with us a little bit about your work in the area of environmental justice.
Well, right now we work with young people from the ages 8 to 22 in our program. And within that, we have environmental programs for all of the young people that participate in our program. And the idea is to get them aware also practicing environmental practices and sustainability within our community, but also sharing that with the community. So the idea is you're learning something of how to be more sustainable in the environment and then teaching it to your community so that you can pass on what you have learned in your home, in your neighborhood, to your neighbors, and then continuing to do stuff where the community can get involved with environmental justice practices.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and we were talking about urban gardening. And, you know, when you're from New York City, somebody thinks that's the last thing that really goes on. But the reality is there's a lot of places and spaces for urban gardening and also farming. And I know that your organization really taps into that component as well.
Yeah, we like to use the phrase urban farmers because we are growing this produce, we are eating our produce. We like to say that we're not just gardening, you know, gardening could be just plants and and beautification, but we actually growing food. We have fruits and vegetables and herbs that are being used in our community. So, farming, urban farming for us is a thing that's been going on in New York City for a long time. It's just, use the garden phase, which is okay, but we want to consider ourselves also small farmers.
Yeah. You know, I know you got youth in the program, and so you take these youth and you really introduce them into farming and becoming urban farmers. And for a lot of them, it's a first go round. Talk to us about bringing them into the culture and what the reception has been like.
Yeah, well, it's the different ages is where they kind of like, you can see how much they want to be involved and how much they kind of like, ooh, that's icky, touchy, I don't want to touch that. The little ones, they're like, you show them a bug, you show them a worm, you show them a roly-poly, you get into the dirt, they want to run around, they want to do anything, they want to touch everything, they'll scream here and there, but let me touch it, that's the beauty part of it. Once they become teenagers and they haven't had that experience in their lives, that's when it becomes a little more complicated. That's where teenagers, we have to kind of like manipulate them to kind of, all right, you don't want to touch it, that's okay. Maybe someone else wants to touch it. When they start to see their fears, not being afraid of certain things that they've been afraid of all their lives, then they begin to open up their wings or their imagination or their, take away their fears of just getting their hands dirty. And just being like, giving the experience for them to kind of like take a plant, take the vegetable right off the plant and eat it or smell it, smelling a basil or smelling any type of aroma herbs that we have, kind of opens up their fear, their horizon of like, wow, this is interesting. This is creative. I want to get more into it. So it's always those type of steps that we have to do with them.
Yeah. And really, when we talk about the Bronx and we talk about New York City, there are a lot of green spaces. You got, several parks and things of that nature. But I know that for you, also trying to help to create green spaces is a part of the work that you do. Give us a little bit about the work there and helping to create that green space.
Yeah, I mean, creating green spaces has always been a dream of mine as a young person. Every time I see a vacant land or a vacant lot, I'm always thinking, this could be a beautiful garden, or this could just be a nice patch of grass where young people or people in the community can kind of just, have a little touch with nature. The more we get disconnected with nature, the less we want to appreciate her, the less we take care of her. So the more green spaces in the city, the more green spaces around your neighborhood, around your upbringing, your life, the more you want to appreciate and take care of nature. So that we kind of help out other gardens, go around other gardens when we feel like they need a little helping hand. Because a lot of gardeners, or a lot of urban farmers, but it's said, always have a lack of support and people support. Sometimes we want to be that support for our community, local farmers that we have here. And then, every time there's like a street, turn it, plant, street trees, plant the street trees, take care of the street trees, clean them out, and just to kind of continue to give our green, our mother, our environment, a little bit of support and attention, and love and appreciation. So having the young people be a part of that makes them feel proud of knowing what they're doing for the community, continue to add more green touch or green space to our community.
Yeah. So I know that you have some environmental projects that you're working on. Share with us what your young people are working on presently today?
So we just installed a greenhouse, and inside of the greenhouse, with help with Uncle Farm, we put in a aquaculture where we have reservoir, and we have right now we have goldfishes, but the idea is to put some tilapias in there, and then on top of it we have we're growing some plants, some kale, some collard greens, some Swiss chard on running water. So there's no soil with this at all. It's inside of the greenhouse. And the greenhouse has 4 compost bins that I invented when I was a teenager with a group called Open Road. And we're just, keeping the greenhouse warm in the winter. Right now, it's hot outside, so the greenhouse is super hot. But I'm sure when the winter comes and it's 30 degrees outside, we're going to be in 60, 70-degree weather inside of our greenhouse. Our plants will be growing all year long. And this is a project that we can have our young people being a part of, growing and maintaining food for the whole year. So to give them a different perspective of what's the possibilities of being environmentally skilled and sustainably skilled to creating different places where you can continue to grow food for your community. This is kind of like a pilot that we want to show to our communities, that every gardener in the community can kind of do something like this. Like this idea of having an aquaculture can work in your basements. With the right light and the right heat, you can start growing food anywhere in all of these buildings that we have. So it's just one of the projects that we're working on. The other ones are basically continuing to install or maintain our green space, teaching young people how to propagate, how to grow new fruits and vegetables, how to maintain it, how to cook it. We have a culinary class that we work with young people so that they can cook and teach young people and teach the community different recipes, the food that they're growing. We have our program broken into 4 different areas. The environmental program, where it's food empowerment, where they focus on other food, nutritional values of all the plants that we're growing, the cooking these values, recipes that we bring to the community. And we also managing our youth market so that we bring in local grown produce from local farms and give access to local produce to our community with our farmers market. In collaboration, we brought in Corporate Hill Farm, has a CSA for our community. So there's about 100 people coming to our CSA and getting their produce, which is also locally grown. Our horticulture society is core group. They focus on maintaining all the green spaces, all the green plants, all the fruits and vegetables in our garden, but also producing more green vegetation or planting or beautification into our street trees. And then the sustainable designs, we're the ones that go into the greenhouse, building the greenhouse, building the aquaculture, working on the compost bins, working on waste management, recycling, teaching young people how to recycle and what we can do with recycles, creating beds out of milk crates, things like that. So just to get the young people in a wide variety of different sustainable projects, but also teaching them environmental justice within their practices. So I like to call it a little ripple in an ocean of possibilities.
Yeah. How hard is the buy-in? Because think about this. We live in a generation right now where young people are kind of like addicted to fast pace, and we're used to seeing things happen 120 characters or less. We're living in this, fast-paced, hustling and bustling environment. But when you talk about planting and you talk about, okay, we'll plant in the summer and we'll see things grow throughout the course of the winter. How hard is that buy-in for young people to really be patient with a process such as this, to be able to see it all the way through?
Yeah, it's one of the things I like to also say, that it's one of the hardest programs I would imagine that young people can get involved when you start hearing gardening or environmental, like sciences. I'm not trying to do that. So we have to tweak the name a little bit so that they don't know it's a part of that, but also plug in a lot of activity. So the buy-in is very difficult, but the way we do it is that we integrate a lot of youth activities and fun time. A little pizza won't hurt. A little food, free food for them. Once they feel that the culture and the environment is actually an environment that they like to be a part of, keeping them here is not a problem. It's just getting them to start with us. So that hook, that we want to get them to begin processing or at least practicing what we do is the hard part. But once they're here, they never want to. I have alumni who's always coming back after college breaks to now like, hey, what are you doing? What can you be a part of? Where can I volunteer? So keeping them involved is not the problem. It's more getting that beginning start. That buy-in is, like I said, free food, fun trips, showing them that, we can go to a farm upstate, or we can go to a farm in Brooklyn, or we can go to a farm in Queens, just to let them know that the city is ours to explore. And what I'm teaching you, or what we want to explore with you, is the environment that you live in, that we have to take care of. And you are a pioneer, you are a warrior, you are a guy of Renaissance superhero. So once they feel that they are part of a bigger picture to take care of our environment, they stay invested. They stay dedicated.
Yeah. You brought up Gaia Renaissance. I want to talk about that for a minute because that's something particularly associated with your young people.
Yeah, so Gaia Renaissance is our leadership environmental. So we had tiers to getting into our environmental group. So we start off with Gaia Explorers. Let me go back. Gaia, the name Gaia, just for people who don't know, we researched that it's the name given to the planet Earth by Greek mythology. So when you give an object or a species or something a name, it becomes more special to you, more real. So when we have pets and we give our pets a name, that pet is not part of the family. So the idea was if we give the planet Earth a name, which she is a living species, a living environment, then we can treasure the planet a little more different. Not just our planet is where we live, but more this is a living ecosystem that we need to take care of. So that's why we use Gaia in a lot of our tiers of our program. So the beginning tier for little kids that come into our organizations, the 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, we do Gaia Explore. So we have a lot of hands-on activity for them. Put your hands in some dirt, touch some worms, look at some roly-poly, eat a strawberry, eat a peach, look at this leaf. Where does the leaf, what type of fruit is this leaf? So giving them a lot of hands-on activity to explore. Then we go into Gaia Junior Gaia, where Junior Gaia is middle school age, where young people are now doing some projects, actually, nurturing some plants, learning about soil quality, soil cycle, learning about waste management, learning about how to cook and doing cooking demos. And then after that, they get a summer job with us, and then they go into Gaia Renaissance. In the Gaia Renaissance, and now you have explored, you have experience. Now we're going to work on making your skills a lot stronger, a lot better, so that you can go out there and teach it as you're working and learning and going through it. So Gaia Renaissance are the ones that will go to other gardens and help out. We'll work on projects in our garden and implement new projects or work on new projects or maintain our existing projects. We'll go to the farms upstate. We'll go to different places to go to conferences, and these young people are the ones teaching or sharing what they have been working on, what they've learned. So this is kind of like our leadership core group. And then after that, once they graduate high school, we like to call them Gaia alumni or Gaia gurus, those that come back that want to be a part of this existence or go to school with to expand their environmental science education and take environmental science courses and come back to they want to be in a career of blue collar jobs.
Yeah. Before we go, I know you do have a summer internship program. It's about 7 weeks long, but for people who really want to find out more information, get connected, maybe a parent is watching right now and saying, I want my young people connected. How do they get connected to you?
We like to say just come by and stop by. We're on 143rd Street, Hamilton Place, in Upper West Side of Harlem. That's one way. You can go on our website, Brotherhood.org. You can call us at 212-283-7044 and ask for information, ask for myself. But we're not shy of getting people tours, talking to people in person. I feel sometimes it's always better to be in person, so come on by and check us out.
Yeah. I lived on 157th Riverside Drive. That's only a few minutes away, but I know Harlem is blessed to have you. Thank you so much, Nando, for being with us here.
Thank you for having me, Daren. It's a pleasure to be here.
All righty, listen, I want you to take a quick break. We were going to take a quick break. I want you to stay with us, actually. We're going to continue with more on the social justice forums coming up right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back to the show. Our next guest is an award-winning author, a political commentator, and race and gender empowerment expert. Now, prior to the global pandemic, Dr. Avis regularly conducted workshops and training on women's empowerment, political representation, and power, as well as entrepreneurial success on behalf of U.S. embassies across the globe. She now joins us to share a little bit more. The co-founder of MAXBLACK Media, Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeever. And Dr. Jones-DeWeever, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'll just say Dr. Avis, if that's okay. So,
absolutely. Feel free.
Well, listen, I want to talk a little bit about your work, because really talking front and center on the issue of women's rights, it still becomes an issue in 2021. The fight still continues. Talk to me about where you see things going right now, because we can say we've seen some progression, but still a lot of work left to be done.
It's a lot of work left to be done. I think that the specific fight for gender equality is ever evolving in the same way that the fight for racial equality is ever evolving. This is one of those demons that we continually have to fight generation after generation. But the good news is that we have fighters who are still here willing to put in the work. And so what we're seeing right now, for example, with regards to this issue, are a lot of things. One of the things that I think that's very important for people to think about, particularly with this context that we're facing in the post-pandemic reality, is something called the She Session. One of my peers, I actually went to graduate school with her, so proud to see Nicole Mason. She's now the president of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. She coined that phrase because they were looking at exactly who were disproportionately impacted with the loss of jobs following the recession. And we see that following the pandemic, and it was women. Women were disproportionately likely to be out of the workforce, either because they lost their job or because they had the increased sort of child rearing, schooling responsibilities as schools closed and are still yet to really be able to come back in full force. So because of these sort of dual responsibilities that women face, they're having a harder time making their way back into this recovering economy. And that's one challenge that I think women across America and maybe even across the globe are struggling with as we look to get back to what I think will be a new normal, not exactly the same normal that we had before.
Yeah, employment and unemployment continue to be a big challenge post-pandemic, no matter what. Pre-COVID, we know that women's rights, when it comes to pay and pay equity, was really, disproportionate. How do you see things coming out of the pandemic? Do you see that shortening up a little bit, or do you see that even expanding with COVID now entering into the mix?
It'll be interesting to see that, because on the one hand, we know that employers are having a work shortage. So a lot of employers are now in the position where they're having to compete for the best talent, meaning that they are having to raise their pay and give other special bonuses and other special things that they are offering individuals in order to try to woo them to work for them. But the reality is that we also know that we have a long history, and there's no reason to expect that this will change, of pay inequities. And we not only see wage gaps, generally speaking, across the sexes. I would argue that we see multifaceted wage gaps when we sort of layer onto that issues that women of color, and particularly Black women, face. So, for example, if the overall wage gap is about 82 cents to the dollar, for Black women, it's about 63 cents to the dollar. And there's a wage gap that exists between Black women and white women, where Black women make only about 79 cents to the dollar that white women make. And so, these inequities, unfortunately, I would expect to remain even as overall pay increases, because in my perspective, this is an example of built-in institutionalized racism and sexism in the intersection of those two in this economy. And it's going to take more than a pandemic, I think, to straighten all of that out.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine. We were watching a basketball game not too long ago. Just the other day, we were talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. They have a co-owner that's actually an African-American woman, and it was a startling sight to see, because many times when we see leadership success, we don't see women and women of color in that arena. Talk to us about what we're seeing right now, because we have seen recently, due to Black Lives Matter, I would attribute more people elevated who are women in leadership, corporate positions. Give us a little bit about that leadership success that we're seeing.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of organizations are now being a little bit more mindful of the fact that they need to do what's necessary in order to diversify their leadership. It's kind of, I guess better late than never. And there's still more work to do with that. But for me, for someone who for many years worked in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, it shows me that all along they could have been doing it, but there was a calculated choice not to. One of the reasons why I don't do that work anymore is because of the frustration that I felt around, being invited in, being asked to do all of these trainings, and giving people recommendations and organizations representation around what they need to do in order to not only diversify their workforce, but specifically diversify their leadership. And then leaving those institutions and still seeing them, in essence, be like many little versions of institutional apartheid, where you have an all-white leadership structure, and to the degree that there is diversity in the company, it's at the lower levels. And so it's good to see that now, finally, they are making some movement to correct that. My next challenge to them is to give those individuals the support that they need to be able to succeed and thrive. What we know from looking at what companies oftentimes do is that they oftentimes give promotions to women, Black people at moments where the particular departments that they're supposed to lead are going through some sort of crisis. And then they oftentimes don't give them the support that they need to really be able to see that crisis through. So I'm hoping that they don't just put these people in place and expect them to work miracles. I hope that they put them in place and then give them what they need to really be able to thrive.
Yeah, very, very important to give people the necessary resources. You spoke a little bit earlier about taking your gifts and talents and using them in your own way. And so I know one of those ways is that you authored a book. I want you to share a little bit about your book and really how you look to empower women through that.
Yes, so I have a book called How Exceptional Black Women Lead. And really, this book was around pulling together the knowledge of exceptionally successful Black women in various different spaces. So I include perspectives in there from women who are in corporate, from women who are nonprofit leaders, for women who are entrepreneurs, for women who are individuals who sort of like are just community leaders. And so I want to show the different perspectives of leadership and how that shows up. And the whole idea here is to be able to demonstrate that, number one, Black women, as I mentioned, have a very different challenge as it relates to ascending to leadership than other people do. We are two sort of rungs removed from the space of institutional power in this nation, in that we are neither white nor are we male. And so we have a very specific area to traverse when we're looking to make our path to leadership. And my hope is that as each new generation embarks upon this journey, that we don't have them embark upon that journey on ground zero, having to figure everything out on their own. My hope was to provide this space where I could collect institutional knowledge from these women who are successful leaders in those various fields, so that they can share their stories and give tips and advice to the women who are in the field right now, trying to make that journey about what sort of path they should take and which things that they should avoid in order to sort of move up that ladder. And it's something that I'm super proud of, that has been, I think very well received, not only in this country, but around the world.
Yeah. Congratulations. And I want to talk about the issue of white fragility, because that's important. I think when you're trying to climb that corporate ladder, trying to really make it, whether you're a woman or even, a person of color, really trying to establish yourself in the corporate sector, no doubt that you run up against the wall of white fragility. Give me your perspective.
White fragility is real, and it is persistent. It's as American as apple pie. Here is the challenge with white fragility. There is this belief of, and we see it not only at the micro level in terms of experiences that people face every day, little indignities, little microaggressions that they might have to endure at work, but we also see it at the macro level. When you talk about what's going on right now, just in terms of the political sphere with regards to the war on the 1619 Project, the war on critical race theory, for example, those to me are prime time examples of white fragility in action. What it represents to me is this sort of hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil approach to being able to avoid the responsibility of creating a more fair and just society. And it manifests itself as this unwillingness to hear truth, this unwillingness to then be responsible for the implications of that truth, and therefore not taking any actions to create a better and more fair system. Unfortunately, I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave that could get rid of it today, but my answer to this question is that we cannot bend to white fragility. We cannot kowtow and bow to white fragility. It's kind of, to me, it's likens to what happens when you spoil a child. If you spoil a child because you're letting them know that they never do anything wrong and everything they do is fine, then they will just be completely uncontrollable as they grow up and get involved in very very dangerous and very bad things. In many ways, I would argue the white community has been spoiled in this country. And that is because we refuse to sort of have any sort of accountability that's related to bad behavior in major ways. And so I really think that this issue of white fragility will not go away. I think we cannot back down. I think that we have to continue to shine a light on injustice and indignities when they occur in every form, whether they be at the macro level or at the micro level, and then move forward with the truth that's necessary to make sure that everyone is aware of those challenges, and then prescriptions around what to do in the future in order to create a better society for us all.
Okay. Help me out here, because I'm trying to scratch my head. I'm scratching my head because I watch a lot of these conversations on critical race theory lately, and I'm saying to myself, bruh, you just don't get it. Like, it's either you just don't get it, or I think you're gonna hit me on this one, help me out on this one, you just don't want to get it.
Yeah, they don't want to get it. Here's the reality. Actually, my dissertation, the theoretical background for my dissertation was critical race theory when I wrote my dissertation now over 20 years ago. And it was a concept that I was then introduced to as a very upper level PhD student in political science. It's a canon that comes out of the legal scholar world. I say all that to say that most people have absolutely no freaking idea what critical race theory is. Okay, it is not taught in elementary and secondary education. It is only something that usually is taught at the very, very high levels of a graduate degree education that, quite frankly, most people never ascend to. And so a lot of the sort of controversy that you're hearing about critical race theory right now is really a political ploy, which has been put out there as a dog whistle to white people that they are supposed to be angry about truth-telling with regards to their privileges. And oftentimes there are complete fabrications that are related to what is and is not critical race theory. The reality is that what it is a very well respected sort of theoretical series of work that's been put together over decades, that's typically only taught at the very highest levels of the graduate degrees. And what it really, at the heart of it, really focuses on is the degree to which whiteness is seen as property in this nation, and how whiteness has been used in various ways and actually been inculcated in the law that privileges some and give unearned privileges to some, the white population, as well as giving unearned disadvantages to others, including people of color. And it's that level of truth-telling that many do not want to subscribe to. It will require then facing white fragility. It will require then honesty. And ultimately, it will require then, if we claim to be a moral nation, it will require that we would do something about it. And because so many in this nation refuse to do anything about the inequities that are built into the system that privilege whiteness and also punishes the lack of whiteness or people of color, because so many people refuse to do anything about it because they benefit from it, what they choose to do instead is to ignore it. And so that, to me, is really what's behind this all out attack on critical race theory. They are threatened by truth because they understand that once that truth is revealed, that if they claim to be moral people, then they have to do something to correct those inequities.
Yeah, we have this conversation, and we're going to have this conversation. I'm going to let you go now, but I'm going to bring you back so that way we can have this real conversation about critical race theory, because I think it's important that we talk about it. I think that people understand really what's behind it, because you really talk about what's behind it and how we really get around that. So, Dr. Avis, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All righty, listen, want to let you know that we are about out of time here on the Social Justice Forums. Want to thank you for joining us. We continue to talk every week, elevating the conversation, getting public participation, and most of all, promoting civic engagement. I'm Daren Jaime. Until the next time we meet here on the Social Justice Forums, take care and God bless.